Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Heidi, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. You are the first one.
Well, I told you I'd be punctual the next time.
There you go. Well, I'm glad you're here. So,
Well, thank you. Is this Ethan or
yes, I'm sorry. This is Ethan.
hi? Okay, I don't know why this screen.
So you should be seeing the welcome screen for the
Welcome to
meeting.
the meeting. Okay, let's see what happens when I start video. I look rough. Oh, I
You're good.
shadowed out.
Yeah, you're coming in dark. Hi,
Good.
Kathy.
Hi, I can't
How are
see.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Okay.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. It is nice to almost see you guys again.
Yeah. I unfortunately don't have a camera. I'm at the office, so I will forego the video.
Oh,
Oh, you lucky.
I know. Kathy and Jennifer, can you guys see the welcome screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I look super weird on video because of where I'm sitting. So I'm gonna video out.
That sounds good. I was gonna say you almost look like one of those like anonymous characters on the shows where they have like the voiceovers and
Yeah, like a predator. So I'm gonna. Oh my God, I hate my dogs.
looks like Chris and David are here and Britt.
You were right. Tina first and then Noble. And then extension.
I'm now in a meeting. How do I do all this?
Hey, Ethan,
Yes, sir.
could you send me that script for the chair if possible?
Yes, I will do that right now.
I'll look at it on my phone. Thanks.
How is everybody doing this evening?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Good.
What's it like being city manager? You having fun?
I made it through a week.
Oh my
Well,
God,
that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Hello, counselor.
let's go club it.
hello, Commissioner.
It's interesting. I'm wearing two hats right now because I'm still really doing with Ethan's help, of course, but still doing a lot of the community development tasks. So I can let you all know that we do have a senior planner starting August 24th. His name is Paul Workman. He comes from Parker.
Nice.
Yeah, I worked with him previously many moons ago at Commerce City, but he's been at Parker for a number of years now, and he's got a great temperament, and I think he's going to fit in well. So,
Well, you look good considering you're exhausted.
Thanks.
Your skin's not botchy and, blotchy. You look good. You look, maybe we need to work you harder.
The pancake makeup goes a long way.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah. You guys don't have a makeup person? I have the little white stuff that you put on here and the little tissue paper. And
They're in short supply with COVID, Chris. Everyone,
well, not my makeup person. She's got connections. I can't see the names here in full. It's kind of strange. Oh, here you have to make it super big. So we are still missing quite a few here, huh?
Yeah, we're still missing, looks like Earl, Dory, Bill said he was going to be calling in, and Britta.
Okay.
And we are being live streamed as well, and everything's being recorded, so stay on your toes.
All right.
All right, no more jokes. Got it.
You guys all ready for Cherry Creek schools to start again next week?
No, I switched the last day.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I signed up my son for in person. And then on that Monday, I called the principal at CHV. I'm like, I can't. I got to move him to online.
Wow. What was your deciding factor, or was there many?
I think it was just a potential disruptiveness of the environment, like going in class and then online, in class, online. So I might as well just put them online.
Yeah.
What about you, Kathy?
Oh, well, my daughter's graduated and she's working in DC, but she's been home with us for the month, which is nice. And my son started his final year at Notre Dame yesterday, where they are all live in person, classes socially distanced. It's really on the forefront of experimental nature on that front, and I'm hoping they can make it happen. He's in a house off campus, so even if they go online only, he can continue to be with his friends and not be in our basement. So he's
read, Kathy, a little bit about Notre Dame and their approach, and they are really taking they aren't really looking at other benchmarks. They're doing their own thing, and no breaks, no nothing. They're going to plow through and be done by Thanksgiving. Start early. An interesting approach.
fighting Irish.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe no football.
Well, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, some of the Big Ten, I don't know. We'll see.
No ACC.
They do have full contact dorm football that wears the old Notre Dame, official varsity team unis. So maybe they'll just all go watch intramural sports and Jimmy will play more. I don't know.
Oh.
They'll find a way to get some football in the culture, but I sure hope. I don't know. I feel like college is maybe the safest place for these people to be in some ways. But what do I know?
Well, best of luck.
And to you and to everyone in all their myriad forms.
Yeah.
Shall we go ahead and get started, or are we still waiting for Bill?
We're still missing Dory and Bill, but I'm trying to reach them right now.
Okay.
Earl, how you doing?
Doing well. Hope everybody else is. It's been one of those days. A lot too much going on, that's for sure.
Sure.
But otherwise, doing well.
It's an interesting little time that we're in with, there for a while, I was just consuming every piece of information about COVID and the science and the trends and the, the
Right.
positivity rates. And I was, and it keeps going up and then down and then up. And now I'm starting to get like, COVID fatigue, and not literal COVID fatigue, just fatigue from paying attention. And I'm almost now to the point of just wake me up when it's over. And so I know, one way or the other, we're either going to be in it for the long haul or we're coming out of it and the vaccine's coming. But it almost wears on you after a while.
I agree.
It's more a case if you learn to live with it.
Yeah.
The way, if you rewind to what, almost 40 plus years ago, when we first had to run on gasoline, you couldn't get gasoline. You learn to live with it. You adapt.
Yeah.
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 Because you really don't have a choice.
Part of that adapting for me, maybe just paying less attention to the daily ups and downs of the numbers.
Right.
Yep. That is one way of dealing with it.
You need to go out, like go to a patio restaurant and decompress.
That may be wise advice.
You gotta go out. Get out where you
I
can.
didn't go to patio restaurants before COVID, so it's no big deal for me.
Hey, let's go ahead and get started, guys.
Okay.
Sounds good. It is a study session, so it's not like if somebody misses a few minutes, it's going to, impact what we can do tonight. So.
Sounds
it
good.
looks
So
Bill has joined us. We're just waiting on Dory.
That's correct.
let me go ahead and call the meeting to order. The August 11, 2020 study session of the Cherry Hills Village Planning and Zoning Commission will now come to order at 5:03 p.m. This study session is being held in conformance with public health orders and guidelines from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Tri-County Health Department. We are conducting this study virtually. And let's go into the roll call of members. Ethan?
Holland,
Present.
Kaplan, Lemaire,
Present.
Lucas,
Present.
Miles,
Present.
Miller,
Present.
and Wyman.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thanks, Ethan. We'll go ahead and get started with the discussion on the master plan community survey. I think Chris is going to give us an update and some ideas that he and I discussed earlier today about how we want to approach it and what we want to do tonight.
So, good evening, everyone. I think my suggestion to the commission tonight would be that what we have for you is really hopefully just reflective of what was already discussed. Hopefully. My suggestion is that we allow Brett to walk through this and review the changes, highlighting the changes that were made, as opposed to sort of starting from question one and having a roundtable on each question. Because again, our hope is that this just reflects what direction you've already given us.
Right.
And I think the reason, I think we've talked about the survey a lot. And there's a guest that we had. Say hi to my son. No.
Whoops.
I hopefully tonight, if somebody wants to jump in on something, please, this is not a closed book by any stretch, but I just want to be sensitive to everyone's time. And I know that last time we talked about the survey, it ended up lasting longer, and some folks kind of lost steam towards the end, and I want to make sure that we keep on point in our meeting area. The second thing tonight will be obviously a discussion about the schedule, and it's me wanting to check in with you guys about big picture about where we want to go. So as long as everybody's okay with this, I would suggest that we turn it over to Britt and let him just highlight updates and then go through it that way. There may be entire questions that we don't even talk about if there weren't really any substantive changes.
Sounds good.
Okay, it's saying I cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Okay, go ahead and try now, Britt. See if.
Okay, that's still giving me the same message.
Okay, I'm gonna stop share, and now go ahead and try.
Now it goes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right, well, good evening again, everyone. Just to reiterate what Chris said, we're just going to go quickly through the overall survey and just highlight the changes here and a few comments along the way. And then I think we could just circle back for a broad discussion and touch upon questions that need a little more discussion after that. So on the character question, for discussion with you all last time, we added a question here about, actually asking people verbatim about the term semi-rural. What do you associate with the term? What should be included with it? What attributes? So it's kind of an open-ended question there. And we are not including images along with that question. So that was the main change on question 1. On question 2, no changes on that. Although we did add a question 3, and this came from discussion. Earl, you had a comment about the images we did have prepared for questions 1 and 2, where we had choices and so forth of different character images, and you thought actually this set of 2 questions here showing a curved versus non-curved street condition actually could warrant additional questions. So we created this question 3, asking about local streets in the village currently include both curved and uncurved streets, and in general, which treatment of local streets do you prefer in order to preserve and enhance the character of Cherry Hills Village? And you also note along the way here, we've added a lot of spaces where you can add a comment. So this question, the choices are yes, no, I don't know, I need to learn more, or add a comment. So this is the one where we thought this set of images would warrant an additional question per discussion last time.
Actually, and I said we're going to go through these. I do want to check in on this one. This is a brand new question, and so I actually wouldn't mind just either sounds good or more of a discussion.
Would you like to do that now or circle back?
If you guys don't mind, can we?
Okay.
Can we jump into this? Because we have not talked about this as a standalone question before.
Right.
And I want to make sure everybody's okay with it.
And I guess I'd say, since I'd made a comment on that, I didn't remember whether I made a comment saying, hey, let's have a street question, but I do remember saying these pictures are indicative of something that goes to the character, the rural character. In other words, I mean, if you had something else that wasn't a street that did something like this, it would be, but that's what this is more of, which is, hey, does the picture on the left represent more of a semi-rural character to you, or does the thing on the right represent more of a semi-rural character? And it just happens to be a road, which is good because it kind of fits that. But so when I read that, I thought, okay, I guess I don't have a problem with the question, but I don't want people going to streets. In other words, you're going more towards the comparison to say, hey, I get what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get some feedback to go, do we want our village to look more like it is on the left, or do we want it to look more like it is on the right, just in general? I think that's what we're trying to get at when we get to the semi-rural character, and anything that helps get feedback along those lines is what we want to do.
So just an idea, what if as a lead into this question, we provided a little bit more context to the purpose? So maybe there's a way to say that the purpose of this question isn't really about, do we want to have this exact condition in every street in the community? That's not the purpose. In an effort to better define semi-rural character, streets are one way to do that. With that in mind, the Cherry Hills Village has two types of, has multiple types of streets, curbed and uncurbed. Which do you think is more illustrative of a semi-rural character?
That's great.
Does that sound all right?
It does.
So I think it's more about setting the question up. The question itself is probably good. We just need to make sure it's teed up properly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess I don't understand this question to begin with, to be honest with you. Are we gonna go out and add curbs where we don't have curbs if people want curbs? Or are we gonna take them off if they prefer not to? I mean, what's the point? What's the point of the question? To me, it's more important to talk about trails and sidewalks and pedestrian walkways as part of the public right of way, not whether or not we got a curb on the edge of the street. I truly don't understand the point of the question.
Well, again, and I think you're hitting on it, Mike. I mean, that's the thing is it's not to sit there and say, do you want curbs or do you not want curbs? It is to try to come up with some pictures that are indicative to try to get some sense of what people mean by rural and semi-rural. And we might have some others that you might want to utilize. And this, I actually do view this as a good example. I'm going to be really interested to see what people want to say, because then when they're sitting there trying to decide what kind of changes do we, because we don't go out and ask all the time, but council will be driven in a direction one way or the other. And you don't want to be wasting a lot of time. Hey, I don't want to be sitting up trying to create the left thing when people want us to be going and creating the right. It just happens to be talking about streets, but it's just indicative. And you could come up with another example, I'm sure, a number of others that would be characteristic of just that overall question of which to you brings to mind semi-rural, left or right?
I do agree with you though, Mike. The purpose of this is not so that we can start enacting a specific street change program. It is not so that we, suddenly then have a giant capital project to suddenly make all the streets like the ones on the left or all the ones on the right. That is not at all the purpose. It is, I think it's really trying to get at a sense of, formality and order. The culvert, no curb is less orderly, and some people may think that is more indicative of semi-rural. Others may think the wide open spaces and the approach on the left is really what they prefer from a semi-rural character.
I jump in here. You might notice that the answers here should not be yes, no. It should probably be A, B, I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
If I can chime in question number 1, I wrote after the last sentence, just a qualifier that's something like in the last 12 years, there's been discussion as to what semi-rural is. And I just wonder if we should put the question out there so people can think of it up front and understand how these subsequent questions might play.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like on question 3, we'll tee it up a little bit differently and perhaps we'll look for a couple extra images that could be paired with these as well.
Sure.
So different choices. Okay. I'll keep going. On lighting, the main issue there was really couching the choices here in terms of lighting allowed under city code versus not under city code.
And again, we don't want to wordsmith, but I did have one there that I wanted to add. I do think you ought to say limit the types of lighting that residences, schools, or clubs. Make it a little bit broader. I'm just sensitive. I'm sensitive to the whole Kent Denver discussion, and we don't want people thinking that's what this question is about.
Totally, that makes all the sense in the world.
Okay.
I think there's another aspect which is not addressed here. Maybe you folks don't see it, but I'm seeing increasing amounts of it in my area, and that is the use of landscape lighting. Now, the question makes reference to exterior lighting, but I think the inference that people will make is, well, we're talking about lights on the outside of a building or post lights or something like that. But we are getting landscape lighting in this area, and some folks leave them on all night. And I don't know whether that is actually contrary to city code and would only be enforced in response to a complaint. But it seems to me that landscape lighting becomes increasingly in vogue, particularly where you've had the scrapes and people are building the McMansions, et cetera, and they throw in landscape lighting as an extra bell and whistle. Should that be addressed in this question?
So there is a standard right now that landscape lighting that is that illuminates specific landscaping elements, you know, those tree lights, and I'm sure you get fountains and those kinds of things. They actually have to be turned off from 11 to sunrise.
Really? That's our code?
That's what it says.
Well, we have
Now-
we have a lot of code infractions.
Probably true. And, you know, we don't send code enforcement out at 11 o'clock at night just to look at landscape lighting. But we would respond to complaints for that. Absolutely. That the landscape lighting is a little tricky in that it's the one lighting that you can actually have it shine up.
Yep. That's exactly what goes on.
Yeah. Well, it's that part is allowed by code. So.
Okay. Although the stuff that shines up, typically you don't see the bulb itself.
Well, now it still has to be shielded from the side, from the right of way, but it's allowed to go up into the air. I think the thinking is, I wasn't here when it was created, but my assumption is that the landscaping itself helps block it from escaping into the night sky for dark sky purposes. That would be my assumption.
Okay.
Okay.
So just for clarification, are we going to mention landscape light in this one, or is that still a separate topic? I hear it being separate.
Well, I think the question here is really about dark skies, is it not?
Right.
And landscape lighting, I see a lot of it, and it's actually pretty interesting. But when you uplight a tree in your yard, it's a real interesting thing to look at, but it's probably contrary to the dark skies concept. And so maybe,
I think that's right.
you know,
And
maybe
I
it
think
should
it
be.
may be exacerbated, say, during the cooler months when the deciduous trees shed.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
But
the reason I'd raise this is reference to landscape lighting per se is not made in this question. And I wonder if the question needs to be expanded just a little to address that topic.
I wonder if there should be a Q4B, part B.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's a good idea, though.
I think it could be a relatively short question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If council did want to make that kind of legislative change, it obviously would be much better if there was some community feedback as such. So.
Agreed.
So it's 4B, sort of a quick follow-up. Okay.
Yeah, quick follow-up.
Could I ask, how does the city enforce the landscape or the house lighting, the down lights, the allowed lights, the not allowed lights? I know there's a violation in my neighborhood. Do I call? Because it's been a violation forever. And or does the city go out and do some exploring on its own?
You know, I think the sort of doing proactive enforcement on lighting is tricky because if it was installed prior to this ordinance being in effect, it's legal.
Right.
So
No, this was put in after the ordinance.
yeah, theoretically. So to be clear, and Britt, can you scroll down just a hair? So these lights are not allowed per the code, but there are some exceptions that allow decorative lights where you can see the bulb. if they're not there to be the primary illumination for pedestrian safety or for security purposes, but they're just there for decoration, there is an exception for those kinds of decorative lights. So
Okay, guys, I have these lights that are not prohibited and they came with the house when I bought it, okay?
Yeah.
I think if we put these pictures up, it's gonna confuse a lot of residents because they don't necessarily know the little nuances of the code. And they're not gonna spend a lot of money to get it up to code unless they're cited for it. So although I like the illustrations, I don't necessarily think we should add them because it may create a lot more questions and work for you.
I would say most of the enforcement work we do is through permits. And so we check to make sure it's compliant through the permitting process. You know, if somebody just went up and put one on the side of their house or as a standalone pole, you know, realistically, we would probably rely on calls from neighbors.
Citizen feedback.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just concerned because if you go down every street, majority of the people on my street have landscape lighting. And then they have light fixtures, which are not allowed under city code that are part of the house when they purchased it, not because they remodeled it that way per se. So I just don't want this questionnaire going out to the countless numbers of residents and then have them say, well, wait a minute, we didn't know this. So are you saying that we have to get rid of this? I just think it would cause a lot of questions. That's all.
Okay.
So I think that the question that we're really discussing here, though, is the basis of the question is, are you in support of maintaining dark sky regulations to limit light pollution in the village? And we're not talking about what has previously happened and what is grandfathered in or what is, you know, enforcing the code. What we're talking about is a bigger picture.
That's right.
Cherry Hills Village residents, do you still want to have a dark sky ordinance or not? And I do agree that I agree that having those pictures in there could lead to a lot of problems as far as the lights go, and even, you know, getting more microscopic on that question with the details of you know, landscape lighting, et cetera, I think that detracts from the larger question, which is, do you want a dark sky ordinance or not? And I wonder if this survey is going to go out digitally, is there a way to embed a link to the specific portion of the code that you're talking about? So if people want to better inform themselves before they answer the question, then they can do so.
That's an interesting idea.
Well, we could certainly include it on a digital version, but the primary intent of this was to be similar to as really from direction from you guys, is to be similar to the mail out survey, the snail mail survey that was done in 2008. This would be sort of a similar format in an effort to capture as many folks as possible.
Which I guess you could still embed the IP address though.
It just won't.
People could type it in.
So
You have to type it in the old fashioned way.
yeah.
Right.
You know, I think what I'm hearing is more of a policy higher level question and less detail. I can tell you from experience, a majority of the folks who want specific lights that don't comply with our standards, a majority say, oh, I'm in support of the dark sky, but that's not what this is. So
Yes.
that's an education function. And I wonder if there could be some outreach in the crier or something like that might help address that. The purpose of this is really to check in with the policy, and maybe the education piece is really handled in another format altogether.
Right. And maybe now we have some time to do that ahead of the survey.
Sure.
Potentially, yeah. And truly the point of the policy really is, and the only way it's truly enforced is going forward, and it's preventing having, it's preventing the McMansions, right, to your point, or some of those where you can catch it in the permitting process and in the inspection process, and shut down those real violators, not whoever's got one of these lights that shines out the side that was already there, that somebody bought from Home Depot and screwed in.
Well, people still get mad. Don't worry. People who want them now, they want them. But I think, Britt, I think we've got direction. I think we can include a more generic, high-level dark sky question.
Yeah.
And, commissioners, I hope you're okay with this, but I actually think, and we can send you through email what that updated question looks like. But because it's higher level of policy, I feel comfortable in I think we could reflect your intent.
Sounds good.
A lot easier than some of these other questions, which are a lot more nuanced.
Sounds good.
Okay, good.
All right. We'll move along. So,
If you don't have any alarms.
okay, question 5 on public art. We actually had just a general check-in with you on this. There seemed to be some question as to whether you all still wanted to have a question related to public art. There was a lot of discussion about how it's administered and so on and so forth in our last discussion. We did add a little more for people to add comments regarding the public art in Cherry Hills Village, including the selection process for public art. So if people want to sound off on that, they can write their comments in there. So that's reflected some of the discussion from last time. But then just checking in with you, we want to see if you all still want to touch upon public art in this initial community survey.
I think it's an important subject, and it's also one that everybody always has an opinion on.
I agree. I think it's an important one as well. I don't like the wording in there because it makes it appear, I mean, I think what you meant is, hey, how do you feel about using city funds for art? But using that word raising makes it sound like, hey, are you in favor of us raising your taxes or fees to support the art thing? And that really pushes this thing to basically everybody's going to say
Yeah.
Maybe we just use that word.
Just using funds?
Using funds and get rid of the parenthetical statement.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that'd be good.
Okay. Anything else on question 5 from anyone?
I just had one comment about, you're never going to make everybody happy all the time with public art. It's always going to be controversial. Does it make sense, or is there a policy now limiting the amount of time that a particular piece of art can be in a particular location? Because that's one way to kind of rotate the art in and out a little bit and keep people happy to the extent they don't like a certain piece at a certain point in time. It's going to change in a year or 2 or 5 years. Any thoughts on that?
Does that fall under the purview of the Art Commission?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'm like, maybe we should loop them in and see what they think.
Just a thought. No big deal. I think it's part of the selection process piece of it.
Could we go back to the phrase using funds rather than hitting the nail on the head, which would be fees and taxes and all, given what we don't know about the effect of the economic downturn, to put it nicely, that coronavirus has created throughout the state and will in some ways, I'm sure, have its own impact on Cherry Hills Village. So what would using funds mean or require? Do you want to go there?
So what would be an alternative, Dory?
Well, I think raising taxes or fees or something like that, or taking the money out of the police department, or sidewalk repair, or making it more precise so that people feel the sense of what art means to the community's vision of itself.
Yeah, again, I'd come back to, I think it's a great question, but I'd come back to the thing phrased in that manner. It's a bias. It's going to be a bias in a negative fashion for art. And by the way, I'm raising this as one who's not a big art guy. I mean, I really don't care, and the issue comes up. But I think that we ought to try to get as fair a representation from the community as we can, which means we have to phrase these in as much of a neutral manner as we can. And anything that talks about raising taxes or fees to do art, that question is going to come back 95% no.
But stating using funds, that question would be more approachable for the average person who's just checking a box and hasn't had a chance to discuss any of these questions with someone who might have more experience in the village.
I think it would. And we could add in there city too, by the way. We favor the village, you know, using city funds to support ongoing public art installations in Cherry Hills Village. And that is what we're doing. Although that's not really even completely fair, because as I understand, I mean, there's always like $25,000 or something like that allocated to the Art Commission, but then they go out and raise private funds on their own. In fact, oftentimes they use that money, city money, for fundraisers to raise substantially more funds utilized for art.
But at that point, I just want to keep us from getting too far down this. You know, using those private funds is, you know, that's more of an art commission policy kind of conversation.
Right.
I think that the question here is really about using taxpayer dollars in whatever format towards public art. And, you know, I think the real question, you know, there's current fundraising and funds being used today for public art. Is that a good idea? I mean, I would hate for this question to get too in the weeds about specific tax increase or of this amount. Or,
yeah.
I think it's really, do we want to use taxpayer dollars for public art?
Right. That's all we're asking. That's all we need to ask.
I think, again, this is a high level question. And the question is, are you supportive of allocating city funds to public art? And then it's the job of the CAT to, you know, if it comes back, no, we're like 80%, no, we're not, then that's the direction the CAT goes. And if it comes back 80%, yes, we are, then the CAT drills down on the specifics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this in our previous master plan, art?
I didn't hear that.
Could you
I'm
repeat
sorry,
that?
was this in our previous master plan, the discussion of art? Was it one of the 4 areas that we looked at? I'm sorry, I'm gonna be totally honest. If you took a survey and said, hey, have you guys noticed all the public art that's around our city? A lot of people are gonna say no. So I don't know if this question is even relevant compared to the money that we allocate, for example, to parks and trails or to our police or fire department. And then to have this question in there and create all this hoopla over funding art that people aren't even aware of.
Do you ask the question, do you like public art? Simply that.
I think we should just keep it very simple.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Bill. I'm good with that.
I agree.
Okay. We can do that.
Okay.
And so what's the wording of the question now?
Do you favor public art?
Do you favor public art?
Or do you support public art? I think you can draw your own conclusion from that, but I happen to be opposite of Earl. I think it's great. And I understand not everybody likes the same thing, but I think it's a simple question. And you don't get the weeds of how's it funded, how's it paid for, who chooses it.
Right.
Well,
Just to be clear, I'm not against it. I just meant that it's not my thing.
Sorry, Earl.
I wasn't being a proponent of it.
We get it. You're anti-art.
Why do you hate art?
He's an engineer. What do you expect?
Hey, by the way, I think they did an amazing job with that statue in front of City Hall. I think that's a
I
fantastic.
agree.
I agree.
I think.
I
it was
love
good.
art.
How that fits.
Frankly, a comment from the consultant side that this opening stage of a master plan process or comprehensive plan process, kind of high level questions that you just kind of steer us towards, that's more typical. That's what a lot of communities go towards. I think in general, this survey has gone into a little more detail up front than many other towns do, but that's fine. That's based upon your input and kind of the taste of items.
Well, Britt, don't you think less is more?
I think a simpler question here is good. Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
I think it also depends on the topic. For example, here on housing, number 6, providing a little more background information helpful. And this one is a little bit more
Sorry.
specific. Yeah. You could ask the question on number 6, are you in favor of diversifying the housing base? And people could say yes, but that's almost too amorphous. This one, I think you could wait till later in the process, but I think this is a key issue that it's good to get this detail that we've laid out here.
It is. And I thought you did a good job providing a little specificity and then putting very specifically, which are not allowed right now. So you guys
Right.
want to see this or not? It's pretty clear what this question's about, and it'd be great to get that feedback.
And it may not be abundantly clear to a lot of people in town that these other options are not available. So I think that's good for people to know.
Exactly.
And some people may be relieved by that, and others may be surprised in a negative way. So, and as a reminder, we took the pictures out of this one. So,
Right.
But I thought that was a good idea.
I think it's a good question.
okay.
I agree.
Right. We'll keep moving then. All right. Multimodal transportation, number 7. This one was left essentially, the options were left the same in terms of rating the quality of different types of travel in the village. There was, per discussion last time, additional lines added for people to add, why'd you choose your rating 1 through 5, what improvements are needed. So there's more open-ended input allowed here on these different options. That's the main difference last time.
Looks good.
I thought it was good.
Okay,
Good.
we'll keep going then. All right. So question 8 has different ideas for people walking, biking, or riding horses. This is unchanged, except we added the word where feasible, just to protect ourselves, protect the process, to make sure that it makes sense in terms of where these things would go. Any comments on number 8?
The only comment I'd have is that I always struggle with that word explore or exploring. Because all that means is, hey, should we consider it? Should we look into it, as opposed to pursuing more of an action item type of a thing? I mean, quite frankly, I think cities should be always keeping and looking for new ideas, and that, in my mind, exploring. The question is, do you pursue it? And it comes up later too. You used that word explore before, but
Good point.
who's ever against exploring anything?
I think pursuing is a more action-oriented word. I think that would be consistent with the conversation we had last time. So I think that would be doable.
That's
Is
good.
is
Well,
the use, is a question such as this. Is the intent here to find out whether the public expects more to be delivered from city government, while overlooking the fact that if funding remains constant or relatively flat, that pushing funds in the direction of something like that, like enhancing the trail system or whatever you would call it, might come at the expense of some other public service, such as maintenance, police, etc. People are always, Earl says that we should, be pursuing new ideas. That's fair point. Nothing wrong with it. But occasionally, people get caught up in the idea of the shiny new object, and it occurs at the expense of some of the more basic stuff. Are we encouraging people to look for shiny new objects here. Because part of maintaining a decent place to live, a decent environment, and I think it should be a part of the plan, is to properly maintain existing services.
Yeah, I agree with that, but this is an exercise in creating a vision, and anything that's new costs money to implement. And we're not here to try and help the city do its budgeting process. We're trying to figure out what ideas people like to basically improve the quality of their life in Cherry Hills Village.
And I'll add on to that. I think if we asked this question a year ago, we would have gotten a different response if we asked this question now. I think one of the biggest COVID-related feedback items that we've got at City Hall is, and it's not widespread, but it's certainly from multiple people, a frustration with increased outside of Cherry Hills Village resident traffic on trails. And so I think some folks with the current situation in mind are going to be against changes, against some of these things that might cost more money, because they are frustrated with the amount of people on the High Line, for example.
One thing I would add is with regard to the paying for things, this is a 20-year plan, and the city might have more resources 5 to 10 years out. So it speaks to the vision aspect. And I'm sorry, somebody else was starting to talk too.
I was just going to say, what if you ask the question in a way that it's just, how would you prioritize these things?
Exactly.
Because that really then guides us into the master plan to be able to say, well, you know what, sidewalks are not a priority if that's what comes back. It gives us some guidance as to what things are priorities to the people in the village.
And I think, and I like what Mike actually was very, very elegant what you said in terms of what we're trying to do here. And I agree with that. At the same time, I do think prioritization to try to get some feedback from the community that is helpful for the city leaders to make decisions as they go down the road. I mean, for instance, our police question, which will be coming up, I really like that question. Hey, prioritize these things. Let us know where you think, because decisions need to be made. It's not aspirational in sort of the elegant way that Mike talked about from a visionary perspective, but we're trying to do both. We are trying to get that vision for the city, but at the same time, trying to get a sense of the priorities from our village residents so that our leaders can make appropriate decisions.
That's a good point.
So we could change this to a ranking, an ordinal type of question easily enough. We would still get a priority feel with the current system of the question, but it's not forcing people to make choices of one against the other.
I think I like the way it is, Chris. I think the prioritization gets to be really challenging. And it's, so you're saying what's the most important, then the next and the next and the next?
Right.
But you could just say the following ideas for people walking, biking, or riding horses are of interest to me, ranked from, on a scale of 1 to 5. You could still scale it. You just drop out that kind of insinuation that if I could choose which one of these I would do, here's what I would choose.
Are we getting though a bit of ranking simply by rating it 1 to 5 versus not interested versus very interested?
Yeah.
At the end, we would still get scores and it would be in order.
Yeah.
But it would be less. It could be theoretically a lot of people put 5 on every single one.
So you could say the following components or the following aspects of the village, because these all already exist in the village. Please rank their importance to you or something like that. Because all these things do already exist. So of these things that exist, which is on a scale of 1 to 5, how important are they to you?
Well, some of these are actually calling for changes from what exists, like additional sidewalks. There's not that many sidewalks along streets in the village, right?
Oh, that's a good point.
You know,
Yeah.
I would maybe modify that a little bit to say additional sidewalks or trails
Yeah, that's true. Because we do
along
have some
village streets.
on-street trails. That's right.
Well, that kind of dovetails nicely with what exists down by Village Center, because there is a bit of a sidewalk, isn't there, in front of City Hall?
Yeah.
Or is that simply an a macadam extension of the bike path? I'm trying to remember. You do have a sidewalk in front of City Hall, right?
There
But
is a
it's more like an
Yeah.
on-street.
Fire and police.
Yes.
And then those merge then into the bike path along Quincy.
Yeah, yeah.
So to expand it to include sidewalks or trails might be a little more enlightening question.
It was interesting. I was riding my bike on that paved trail. And we talked about this last time, but there is actually a dirt trail next to the paved trail right along that split rail fence
Yes.
for a portion of, it's kind of where the Kent property is, I guess, mainly. I was on the High Line last week and a FedEx delivery vehicle came along the High Line.
Whoa.
I was
Wow.
riding my bike. I stopped and I put my hand out. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, UPS does it. I'm not making that up. It was a FedEx guy on the Highline Canal.
That is wild.
Wow.
Mike, I hope you called somebody at City Hall or somebody.
Okay.
I told my wife,
Wow.
she's the executive director of the Highline Canal Conservancy. They're gonna get their own police force, by the way.
Oh, really?
They should. I'm just kidding around.
I shouldn't spread that around.
I have one little insert that I would like to add. Instead of like saying additional bike and pedestrian trails, we need to put in the word public. I think if residents knew, like, hey, these are public. Do you want more trails where it's public access, and more non-residents can use these trails and bike pathways? Would you be open to that? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well,
I think
this,
the
all
answer
these,
is, I certainly don't want to promote non-residential use.
But that's what we have. I mean, if you go on the high.
I know it's out there, Jennifer, but I don't see any reason to encourage it.
No, but I don't want the residents thinking, oh, is it just for residents only? No, these are actually going to be public avenues where anyone who's not even a resident can use. That's all I'm saying. Okay, I hear crickets.
crickets. Well, I guess I hear what you're saying, but to me, these are all public. These are all public rights of way.
I understand, but if you're reading it, it may seem like, oh, well, is it just for the residents? Because it's a residential survey for our city's master plan. And I don't think some of the residents are going to pay attention to the fact that if we do have these additional bikes and trails and all these amazing things, that it's just going to increase potentially foot traffic or car traffic. It's just going to be a lot. So I just think we should put public in there. This is my opinion. You guys don't have to let the residents know it's going to come with non-residents using these paths.
The word public could be put into the tee up for the question in the, the text up above.
Yeah,
Q8.
that's a good point.
Agreed.
So
back to the
Okay.
question. I think we can add the public in there, that in the meat of the question, but do we want to change the format of the question? Or is it okay with the 1 to 5, knowing that we'll get a score at the end of this?
I'm okay with it the way it is. What do you guys think?
I'd leave it as it stands.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I'm fine with it. I mean, you're gonna get, like somebody made this comment before, you're gonna get the same thing. If it was a ranking, it would there'd be more separation. And as it stands now, like you say, everybody's going to put in 5. I mean, it's going to be 4.9, 4.8, 4.7, 4.6. There's your ranking. I mean,
Yes,
there
agreed.
it is. It's
And
just
this
I
is a
agree
lot-
with the way it is as well.
Right. And this is a lot simpler for the average user. Do it this way.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll move ahead
Let's
here.
keep moving then, Britt.
Yep, we're moving. Okay. Question 9. We've got the image associated with question 9. This is about the cut through traffic. This is one where, okay, the word explore is here again.
Right.
Earl. You might want to modify that. It's the same kind of prioritization 1 to 5 here in terms of testing speed humps, posted speed limits, et cetera, et cetera. We did add the roundabouts per, I believe, direction last time. So that hot button topic is back here as an option.
I did have a chance to float that by a couple of council members because it's in the next question as well. It got added to the next question as well. You know, everybody I talked to on council is like, well, we're not going to overrule anybody. This is their survey.
Yeah.
But they don't like it. There's no question.
But do we really not know the answer? And I think their statement was, I certainly think I know what the community thinks based on the feedback I personally got. So.
But to be fair, and if I was talking to them about that, I'd sit back and say, you know, when you're getting ready to do something, the people that are against something come out, and the people that are for it don't. This is a survey. This is a survey. Hopefully, we'll get a widespread thing. It's not just people that have an axe to grind. We'll get a large, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of response we get in that regard.
So I would agree with you. I would add, it might be a good idea for this particular question, you know, just so folks didn't feel that this was a sneaky thing or that the city's pushing for roundabouts. It might be a good idea to add a section for people just to expand on their thoughts or, you know, additional comments on the topic or any one of these choices. And that way folks can feel they can express more strongly about the roundabouts if they wanted to.
I agree.
I
with
think
you.
that's a great idea.
I
I
think so.
agree.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
And
let's do that.
open your ears to the street. People aren't talking about public art. People aren't talking about, you know, equestrian. They're talking about crime and traffic. That's what the residents primarily care about, in my opinion. And this is from what I hear, okay? I know not every resident has the same opinion, but when you hear it over and over again, it's kind of like we should include as many options and definitely the opportunity for comment. You know, put your money where your mouth is. Where do you want the funds to go?
Right.
I agree.
All right.
So
Hi.
I just have a question that this question in particular has been kicking around in my head as I've been driving through the village. So if I'm responding to this question as a resident of the village, I think what I wonder is, do I count as cut through traffic? So I now have reason to go to the east, and I'm driving down, and I live on University. And I'm driving down Quincy every day, which I normally would not, because Quincy, the other places I go don't take me down Quincy. But I am using Quincy as a cut through. Do I count as cut through traffic as a resident?
Yes.
No.
Well, it depends. My view would be it depends on how you mean that. I mean, in other words, I don't personally believe that any resident is cutting through their own community. Okay. But in terms of a traffic study, you know, if you entered into the village in a certain area and they exited it, you'd be a cut through, you'd be shown as cut through.
Right.
The traffic study, you know, just from an objective perspective, you could very well be seen as cut through from the study perspective. But I don't think, this is my opinion, generally, I don't think anybody believes that the residents of Cherry Hills Village aren't allowed. That's not who they're talking about, stopping cutting through, I don't think. But maybe they are. I mean, but I would hope
I'm just
not.
curious because I think I answered the question differently now that I've had the chance to drive down Quincy every day for 2 weeks.
If your origin or destination is within the village, I think that eliminates traffic. Now, there will be occasions, myself included, where I have used Quincy to get from one side of town to the other, but that's because I wanted to avoid Bellevue or Hamden. At that point, yeah, then it is cut through because neither my origin nor my destination were in the village. So I would couch that cut through as origin or destination.
And as we're following up on the 2008 survey, part of what we're trying to get at with these questions is how to reconcile two competing goals.
That's right.
Of improving access to residents while eliminating cut-through traffic. And so in that framework, I think cut-through traffic is really talking about folks who are not starting or ending in Cherry Hills Village.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get worse with COVID because there's not a lot of school buses running. So it's just going to get a little more aggressive, maybe. I don't know.
Well, and again, and the other thing that I think is important too, we have residents that say, I don't want anybody in the village other than Cherry Hills people. I mean, that's what they believe, and full stop. But then the next thing is saying, all right, well, let's say now that you've got people coming in, do you want them on Colorado, Quincy, and Holly, a lot of people, and no one going through, Dahlia or whatever our side streets are? Or do you want to be pushing them off to that area? Because one says we should be doing everything we can to actually have the traffic flow on Quincy and Colorado and Holly, et cetera, which is going to increase the traffic on those roads. But if it decreases the traffic cutting through the residential areas, if you were the real residential areas, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah. And that's actually an interesting discussion where nobody ever really seems to be able to focus. When we have our community meetings, people are all over the place. They don't even get it.
And I think that probably is worth exploring. I don't think this tool is probably the best
way to do it, right?
Yeah, it's probably not the best one to get at that. I agree with you though. That is, talk about fascinating. People have come to terms with their own predisposed biases about what they should be able to access, what everybody else does. So
I do like that definition though of if your origin and or your destination. It would have to be your origin would be in the village, not your destination, because your destination could be anywhere. There may be a way to define cut through traffic.
Well, but with under destination, you would with destination, you have to consider people, vendors who come in to perform services such as lawn crews, deliveries by FedEx Prime. Those are destination. Does that make for cut through traffic? Not if you want to get your stuff from FedEx Prime.
Yeah, definitely a quandary.
I think the original 2008 question revolved around people that are going from Denver to the tech center.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do think you're going to see a bit more cut through traffic. Well, maybe more in a bit on Quincy, even once we're past COVID-19, et cetera, because of that light now at Glenmore Country Club on Bellevue. It's going to back up Bellevue, and I think it's going to push traffic onto Quincy. We've certainly seen the effect on Quincy over the weekend when Hamden's been closed.
Wow.
Yep.
There's definitely been more traffic on it.
So
okay, can we move on, guys?
Yep.
The only question I had, a question 9 remaining, was instead of saying definitely do not want to explore versus definitely should be explored, should it be pursue? Kind of harkening back to the earlier question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just verifying. Moving on then. Okay. So question 10 is also, it's asking about intersection improvements such as new turn lanes. We add roundabouts, and we have a ranking from highly interested to somewhat interested down to unsure. And then under add comment, you can add about particular strategies you like or don't like. So there's just been a couple changes to this one from last time.
Okay.
All right.
On your add a comment, I know this is just preliminary, but are we going to have like 2 or 3 or 4 lines where they can do a little writing if they want to?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Number 11 has been modified to have a similar setup as number 9, a ranking of 1 to 5. We can change this to be pursue word as opposed to explore. And we have options here for the same options we had last time: dedicated bike lanes, sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. We've added space for people to add information about the reason behind their selection. This is per discussion last time.
That came from you guys, right?
Right.
Okay. That looks good.
All right, we'll keep going. And I guess everything where it says explore, we're going to change to pursue. That's a kind of a blanket takeaway here. Question 12, we've also modified to have a ranking of 1 through 5 for each option. We've called out specifically what we mean by different parks here: passive versus active, three pond parks, so on and so forth, natural open spaces. And we swapped out, I believe, either now or the last time we did this back in June, the image for John Mead Park. It's actually that rendering of what it will be upon completion. But the overarching question for you all, as noted here, is should we keep these photos, or are they really not adding a whole lot of value in your mind?
I don't think they add much, to be honest. I mean, you know, the 3 pictures versus the sketch of the John Mead does, because you get a playground. The rest of it all looks natural and open to me.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, we'll take them out. Move on to 13. What kinds of improvements to the local parks and open space should the master plan update explore? So this one seems like a different use of the word explore. It's more like a big picture question about the overall process. Should we look into this? So to me, that seems like a little bit different than the other uses of explore earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Modified or added 3 options here about adding more parks into the space around the village, improve connections between different trails and parks, and additional or enhanced park programming within parks, such as the car show. And that's all per feedback from you all last time.
Mhm.
On 13, you're going to leave the photos?
Certainly can.
There was not as much discussion about these not adding value last time, but it's totally the commission's call.
Right. We can take it out if you want. Any consensus on this?
Yeah. The one thing I'm wondering a little bit with the photos, were they all taken here in Cherry Hills?
Not all of them, no. In fact, actually, majority are not from Cherry Hill.
I was going to say, I think only one.
Isn't this going to cost us a lot of money to print this survey out?
It's mainly going to be online, I think, isn't it?
No, I think you guys felt when we started this survey process that it was important to do the snail mail survey.
Yeah, it's going to cost the city a lot of money for illustration that may not be necessary. I don't know. It's up to you guys.
If you don't think it adds a lot of value, then I would recommend taking it out.
Right.
Works for me.
Yep, I'd take it out.
Okay.
I'd take it out.
It's gone, or it will be gone. Okay, moving along here. 14 different methods the village can use to preserve or fund vistas and views, natural features, and open space. So this is again, as mentioned last time, a reiteration of a question from the 08 survey. And we didn't have any notes on this one for any modifications. Anything else on this one? Keep it?
Looks good.
All
Keep
right.
it. Yep.
On to sustainability. So for this, Ethan sent over a Word doc, those questions. And so I have to unshare what I'm sharing, I believe.
And I'll tell you where that came from.
Yeah.
I have a intern who's in the master, who actually has recently graduated from the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning at UCD. And she did those questions, and I'm not avoiding responsibility for them. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, but
Yeah.
I would say, let's let everybody look at those on their own. There's a lot of material there.
Yeah.
And reply later in writing or however you feel is appropriate, but let's not go through them right now, point by point.
Yeah. There's a lot of content here. There's 7 questions.
Yeah.
All the good stuff.
Good,
It is
there's
good
good-
stuff, but I would say though that, just to make sure, because I don't think this was your intention, Mike, is that we're not going to have, you weren't intending that we have 7 questions on sustainability, and I would think that probably at most we'll have 2.
Well, I don't think we need 7. There may be 7 topics within sustainability, but again, it was intended to be broad so we could pick and choose what we want and refine it and maybe prioritize what we think are the important areas.
Okay.
So what I would request is that you email some thoughts and maybe which questions you would prefer to be included to us. Do not email the group. Remember, open meetings. But email that to me and Ethan, and we can try and take some of those email comments and provide to you a more refined
Sure.
version of this based on the feedback from all of you.
That sounds great.
Okay. Well, then returning to the overall list of questions, number 16, public safety and crime. So this main modification on this, for the allocation of funding, this actually is a ranking 1 through 10 option question.
And if you recall, the conversation last time did point to a ranking on this one because
Right.
there was a discussion about this doesn't need to be, 4.7, 4.8. You guys were really interested in choices. If folks
Yeah.
had to make a
And
choice.
I still think that's the case, although the only thing that I would change is I'd say when you're added red lines there, 1 being the most important and 10 being the least important, I'd make that highest priority and lowest priority. I mean, in other
Okay.
words, they're all important.
That's right. I would agree. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Can we just say something to the effect, like, instead of ranking it, because these are all very important. I mean, it's not like you could easily rank them, except for maybe get rid of graffiti or fraud. Who cares? But can't you just say, like, what out of all these things, what matters the most to you? And then just have people check the box instead of ranking it? And then we could tab it up and say, hey, burglary, safety in parks and children and families and violent crime all matter in our community. I don't understand why we're ranking. I mean, they're all horrific. I care about every single one of these.
So, and I think
Depends on which one you've been affected by.
Yeah, I think the discussion last time, I think the format of the question was discussed last time. And the idea was that if you just make it a 1 to 5, you really are going to get 5s or whatever across the board for every single one. And the question will lose its value and helping to check the temperature on what residents feel is going well versus not going as well. Because the question actually started off in the very beginning with a little bit more of a performance-based kind of question, and our chief kind of weighed in and said, no, that's not going to be that helpful. And so that's what led to this format a little bit more.
Perhaps the implicit question in all of these is, which one of these things do you fear most? What are you the most?
Murder.
Write that,
Murder.
write this. I'd rather write that. What do you fear the most, I don't know.
I don't think our chief would find that
Probably not.
a very supportive.
By the way, shouldn't one of the things in there be, motor vehicle safety or speeding, or, in other words, these are the things you want our police force to be focusing on.
I agree. Good call.
Wouldn't it
Good
be
call.
about Speeding or traffic.
You can put that in, but you've already addressed it somewhat in the traffic questions. Because one of the priorities, if you will, is reduce speed limits. So that implicitly, if not explicitly, is going to require a greater enforcement effort, I would think.
I agree, but let's say this thing came back and the emphasis, all of a sudden that was down in the rankings. Our police department does spend a lot of time, basically with their radars, being in a position on the side of the road, etc. They spend a lot of time actually being present to try to reduce speed, which then of course takes them away from something else that they might do. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that what the community wants or doesn't want? Would they rather have those guys patrolling than doing that? I don't know.
Fair point.
So I will just tell you, I am going to just check in with the chief on this added category. These categories primarily came from her. So not that she's going to oppose it or anything. I just want to be transparent and collaborative on this. So I'll check in with Ethan.
Okay.
Don't let me forget.
You might also add, it's well known that the police love to go after allegedly stolen vehicles and will go to any length racing through intersections. And if there are children and families walking, they want to get that alleged stolen vehicle, and then all hell can break loose in that process. I'd be curious to know what Cherry Hills Village Police Department does in that situation.
Yeah.
Can I also add another like Q16B, like something to the effect of, would you be in support of being assessed higher taxes or something to that effect for additional police force and patrol? I mean, yeah, all these things are great, but we don't have a force big enough. If we're going to more parks and trails and sidewalks, we're not going to have the cops to go there and provide the safety. So I think it's a good question to ask residents, are you willing to pay for this safety? Do you want more of it? Or I'm sorry, I missed prior meetings, so maybe you guys already figured this out.
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, this is a broad visioning document for priorities. When we get down to spending and taxes, that's subject to legislative determination and approval by the voters. So I think that is a very good point raised by the commissioner, but it may be a bit beyond the scope of what this particular tool is designed to, the information is designed to attract and obtain.
No, and I agree with you that all the questions that are you willing to pay, like the art commission, through taxes or fees to support, then all those need to be stricken out too.
Well, that's been changed, right? To do you support public art?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I mean, I just think we should ask the residents in general, like, hey, do you think we need more cops? Yes or no?
You'll probably hear from them if more costs are proposed.
Well, just to be clear, if the idea is raising taxes for additional cops, then we will have to go to the voters for that.
Well, I think it's a separate issue, and is perhaps not real germane to this survey here. As Mike pointed out earlier, this is more of a vision. Some people may say hallucination, but it's a vision. When you get to implementing or fulfilling the vision, that's when the harder decisions have to be made.
I agree, but we're asking,
as long as you're just doing
additional parks and trails, and that's going to cost money. Do you want right-of-ways and all this other stuff? It's going to cost money. So all the questions that we're asking our residents, in some way, shape, or form, ties back to, hey, here's your wish list, but if you want it, you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
That reality will dawn on them soon enough.
But and that is correct, but that's a decision for city council at a later date. It's not something we necessarily need to worry about in the master plan.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll move along. 17, we had a drainage question. Essentially, it's unchanged. Wrote in here, I think,
yes.
Chair, you were going to confer with Emily Black regarding this question.
Chairman Lemare has not fulfilled his responsibility here on question 17.
Okay.
But I will do so. I need to talk to the Highline Canal Conservancy and Emily, and I'll get something there. And
Well, get
sorry,
rid of taxes and fees.
With respect to the Highline Canal and drainage, and I'd be interested in the answer. That's only going to affect a portion of the village. Basically, that portion east of Colorado Boulevard and uphill from the canal. Anything that's downhill from the canal is not going to have a drainage issue into it.
the canal can handle that drainage from those properties, correct? That is correct.
Right, but that's also going to take a change apart from Denver Water. The existing stormwater flows into the canal they tolerate, but already back 20 years ago, Denver Water was starting to impose restrictions on developments, or try and impose restrictions on developments proximate to the canal where there would be a stormwater impact.
Right. So the Denver Water is looking at the canal through a different lens these days.
Okay.
And it will most likely involve, to make a long and involved story very simple, converting the canal from what it is today, which is a water delivery system with 70 customers left, to a stormwater collection facility with no customers that take water out of it. And what that can do
voluntarily.
Yeah. What that can benefit properties that would otherwise have to build on-site stormwater retention, number one, and number two, and probably more importantly, it keeps water in the canal that will keep the trees and the vegetation alive, because what the canal really is going to be in the future is a linear park. And that's the way most people think of it today. But in fact, it's owned by a utility company and was built and used for delivery of water to customers.
Right.
But it's a long and involved story. And let me work on that question and try and bring some clarity to it.
All right.
Is anything else going to be involved in this stormwater, in this drainage / stormwater? Because your secondary drainage course through the village is Little Dry Creek.
Don't understand your question.
Okay, if you want to use stormwater drainage through the Highline Canal, there's only a portion of the village that can use that. If you're downhill from the canal, you can't put water in the canal. You're not going to put water in the canal. So you think of, just use Kent Denver as a large example. All of its stormwater runoff is going to go into Little Dry Creek.
Correct.
If you're talking about drainage and stormwater management, do you want to restrict it just to the canal, or do you want to include Little Dry Creek as well?
Oh, well, that's an interesting thought. And I don't know the answer to that.
Sure, what the policy question would be. The High Line is a little different in that there's items to be discussed.
Right.
The Little Dry Creek is really established through our existing Mile High flood control district regulations, city floodplain regulations.
Yes.
Okay.
The High Line's a little more in flux. I know that
exactly. Yep.
Okay.
All right. On number 18. Yep, 18. The question remains from last time. It's a question about community facilities. And really the takeaway, we heard some discussion last time. Would you like to take this question out? Because do you see the need to have this discussion about additional facilities like these?
I should note, after reviewing the discussion from last time, this is typical community question in this kind of process, but just because it's typical doesn't mean we have to do it. So if it needs to come out, it certainly can.
Well, I think it's a perfect segue into the second part of our conversation, which is the timing of the master plan update, because many of these items we could have a greater need for them after we figure out what the world's going to look like in 2021 compared to where it is today. For example, work from home. Everybody's working from home. We talked about this. I've talked about this a little bit with Chris. Does that mean there may be more of a need for a daycare center? You have a couple with each parent working at home. The kids aren't in school the way they used to be. You can't take them to school. Can you take them to a daycare center? Similarly, if you don't have your office downtown anymore, should the community center have some meeting rooms where people can meet and have conferences and be socially distanced and on a covered outdoor patio or things like that? So I think there may be things that come out of the post-COVID environment that we don't know about right now that are directly on point with some of these ideas. So I wouldn't take the question out.
No, but if you want,
change.
if you want, let's say, a greater sense of people's sentiments in the matter, these are pretty much traditional questions which appear in comprehensive plan, whereas the items that you raised are not referred to here, such as conference center, conference rooms, etc. Should those be enumerated as examples?
The list could be broadened, I think.
Given what you said, I think that Rick might want to talk about that with you perhaps a little further, because you seem to have given more thought to this matter.
Yeah.
And when we come back to the next iteration on this survey, he could include them then.
Okay. I think
certainly
let's keep it in and keep working on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we're down to the easy ones. Demographic questions, they're all staying in. Question 22, we did research, and this is apparently the standard now for asking the question, what is your gender, male, female, or other, please specify. And
okay. We're not going to get a list.
No. All
That's
right.
fair enough.
So, Chris, I think we have good guidance on this, and Chair Mayor will come back to us with some additional information about highline and drainage, and
then we'll get some emails from the rest of the commissioners about
sustainability. So I guess
Rick?
now is a discussion of schedule.
Yeah, so let me, if I could, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just kick the discussion off and turn it over to all of you.
Sure.
I put this on the agenda mostly to check in with all of you, because from my perspective, I think I've tried to be consistent with my messaging all along that, at a certain point we've had some good work to do, and we've done a lot of good work, but we are going to hit a point where we won't be able to have a town hall meeting, and it may make sense to discuss whether or not we want to hit portions of this on hold or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if we're there. I'm not proposing to you that we are or are not. I put this on the agenda so that I could hear from you guys as to what you think that looks like from a schedule perspective. I do want to remind you all of a couple of items of feedback that Ethan and I have been operating under based on what we've heard from you previously. One is the Citizens Advisory Task Force. There has, up to this point at least, been general agreement that will be most effective in person, that it's going to be too large and unwieldy for a presentation response format that Zoom often provides, and that it should be more of a back and forth dialogue. So far we've heard from you guys that Citizens Advisory Task Force should really be in person. The second item is that the entire process really is going to get, once we can't get past the initial community-wide open house town hall meeting, that if we can't have that, then that is somewhat of a stopping point. So knowing those are two assumptions that staff has had, I want to check all of your temperature, no pun intended, on what you think about the schedule and the pandemic conditions that are existing moving forward. So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you, but I just wanted to set the table for this conversation so everybody understood why I put this on here.
So I'll go ahead and respond, and I've talked to several of our commissioners about it individually. I agree with what you said, Chris, about the necessity to have an in-person meeting for the Citizens Advisory Task Force, number one, and number two, and even more importantly, I think, are the open houses, where we're inviting community members in. We want a friendly, relaxed environment. We want to encourage people to collaborate and share ideas, and we want people to be excited. And we don't want them in an environment where they're worried about how close they get to somebody else looking at a board. And so I think those two things are critical. And I think the timing, even of what we're doing now, ties into when we kick off the CAP meetings and the open houses. And I think we should slow things way down, if not hit the pause button, and review everything in a period of time, whether it's 6 months or 8 months or 12 months. I think there's so much turmoil right now with the economy and with the health conditions and the political situation. I think that there's going to be new ideas and new questions and new thoughts on the other side of the pandemic than there are today. When we get into that, call it a new reality. And I think there could be some really interesting ideas that come out of it that we have no idea. We don't understand today. And so this is a visioning process where we're looking 10 years into the future, but the present or lens today is very cloudy and very uncertain. And to me, I think we want to wait a while before we continue on.
You think, are you of the opinion that this would affect the type of questions which we are currently asking?
I think that it could, and I think we've done good work so far, but I guess my suggestion is we don't finalize the survey yet. We just kind of park it and hit the pause button and get, maybe at least into next year before we move forward with things.
Well, I think we can take what we've done heretofore, let Rick update from this discussion tonight.
Yes.
So what has been done so far is completed. And then I concur with your notion of deferring for a while. If there are no major changes, and we have no way of knowing one way or the other, then once we are of the opinion that we can proceed with this matter, then the survey is already ready to go. All you have to do is send it out.
Right.
If it is our conclusion that additional material needs to be added, or some existing questions need to be deleted, that's fine. It can be done then. But the let's be down to a final draft on the survey before we hit the pause button.
Yes, I agree. Other opinions?
Yeah, probably what you said makes sense. The biggest issue in my view, and I probably have the most aggressive view on this, I suspect, is the public meetings cannot be held until such time as the COVID situation is resolved. For exactly the reason that you said, Mike. I mean, and the public meetings are critical. And we wouldn't be able to move forward with those until such a time, and that's probably going to be into next year, probably at the earliest. Well, then you back up and you say, okay, so then when does the survey have to go out, and when does the CAT need to be meeting in advance of that? I don't know what that is. I've maintained, I think the CAT could be meeting, but I know that there are others that are more sensitive to that and have a different view. And so I suspect that probably we're going to end up just pushing the whole thing off. I agree with David that at a minimum, though, we ought to try to get a relatively final draft of our survey. But I do believe that probably the CAT work could be done if we wanted to do that. It's just a question of how much out in front of the public meetings, and the public meetings clearly can't happen until such time as there's more clarity on the health situation.
As I said a couple of meetings ago, COVID is the elephant in the room with everything we do. And a final draft of this survey, I think, is meaningless, given that what the result will be a response to the different words on paper, but not the interchange that we've always had, the robust dialogue and discussions. The final draft will not incorporate that. And therefore, I don't see how we can continue to push forward with the master plan at this stage.
We have a difference of opinion.
You bet.
Jennifer, are you still here?
I am.
Any comments?
I think we should shelve it, like you said.
That doesn't mean that the work has been wasted, that the discussions among us have been wasted or misfocused in some way. It means that they're partial in the sense that we don't have the community voice in the same room with us. We haven't talked to our neighbors because you don't go next door and ring the bell without your mask on and six feet away, and the whole environment is different. And I think we have to do more than lip service to that. I think we have to respond.
Doris too.
I'm on the CAT group, and I'm going to have to resign because I will not go to any live in-person meetings until we have confronted COVID with the final solution, which is the vaccine. It's that simple.
And I think other people will feel the same way. Yeah, I think that's a realistic concern, but I'm also worried about people just being distracted and not being as enthusiastic as they would be, and not being excited about planning for the future of the village in a 10-year master plan, because they're too concerned about their health or the economy or the social turmoil that's going on. I think people are really distracted right now with a lot of different things. And I'm just worried we're not going to get, in addition to the health part of it, we're not going to get good, meaningful input from the citizens at the present time.
This virus doesn't look for good, meaningful input. You know, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I'm going to send you video of what's called well, I won't even tell you what it's called. I will send it to each of you and you'll see why I'm as hesitant and as certain after being hesitant of having to wait to get COVID out of the room before we think that we've accomplished what the village and what the city council and what commissioners on planning and zoning have always seen as the master plan, what it means to moving forward, how it envisions the future. I've had my say. The video is the lily pad effect.
Thank you. That'll
Okay.
be interesting to read.
Yep.
A couple related issues just to throw out for everyone's consideration. We've got a new planning director coming on board. That's exciting.
Senior planner, just to be clear.
What's that?
A senior planner.
Senior planner.
Yeah, he won't be planning director right out of the gate.
Does it make sense for that person to spend a little bit of time in the village, getting to know the village and the people before getting thrown into a master planning process? Number one. Number two, other things going on in the village, such as the Quincy Farm situation. There's a lot of things unresolved there that would be nice to get further along, because that needs to be part of our plan in some manner, because it's an important asset to the community. And similarly, and this was one of the things Laura Chrisman brought up, and I don't share the concern necessarily, but the new underpass for the Highline Canal could be a pretty dramatic change for the village. It may not be, but things like that would seem to be better to let those happen and then work on our plan afterwards.
Mr. Chair, I might just attempt to make sure that staff is fully in alignment with the desires of the commission. So if you all will mind, I'm just going to run through 3 different processes and confirm what I'm hearing from all of you. Does that
Sure.
sound okay?
Yeah.
So for the overall big picture process, especially as it relates to having a community meeting, I'm hearing a lot of support for holding off.
Correct.
Sound good. For the technical advisory team, I similarly have heard overall support. I know Earl, you think we can probably move forward with that, but I haven't heard anybody else really chime in with that same view. Is that? Earl, no offense. I'm not trying to.
No, I'm oftentimes on the edge of the pillar, so that's no problem.
Does that sound accurate to everyone else, though?
I believe so.
Yes.
So I guess the only remaining thing that I think I'm unclear on is whether or not we hit the pause button, like literally after tonight, on continuing to work on the survey, and we wait and see how some of these issues turn out that may change how the survey's worked on or worded, I mean, or do we continue making the changes that we talked about tonight and then hit the pause button after that? With that said, before you answer that question, just as a heads up, we will likely have in-person public meetings the next 2 months, meaning we may not have a lot of time for discussion of the survey.
So I don't think, Chris, I would vote for the latter of the 2 options you described. And I think that's consistent with what Commissioner Wyman talked about earlier. Let's get the survey in good shape for where we are today, and then put it on the shelf for a period of time. But I think we should follow up on what we did tonight, and take that the next step.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
Good with that.
I'm probably also, this represents a bit of a schedule change, obviously, and I will make sure that City Council especially is aware of this, probably in my report to them next Tuesday in the City Council meeting.
Okay. And Chris, you may know, I have had a conversation with Russell about it, and he was very supportive. If he said if the commission feels that way, then I think that would be a recommendation I'd support with the council.
Yeah, I'm not bringing it up so that council can sort of
Yeah.
override or do anything
Yeah.
different. It's more a matter of
No.
just being respectful
Sure.
and collaborative. So
Exactly.
I wouldn't expect any of them to want to do anything different than what you guys are comfortable with. So
Right.
Good.
Chris, just, you said 2 in-person meetings, so we should probably figure on a meeting on the 8th of September.
yeah, tentatively, this is all tentatives, just this could change. But Denver First has submitted 3 applications for a subdivision, a rezoning, and a site plan amendment.
Yep.
The intent is to bring all 3 of those on the same night, but our subdivision process has 3 steps. A sketch plat, which is a high level review, a preliminary plat, which is the most intensive review, and then a final plat. The sketch plat is only reviewed by you. The preliminary plat is reviewed by both you and City Council, and the final plat is only reviewed by City Council. Therefore, of those 3 steps, the one we would like to combine is the middle step. So what their hope is, and this is frankly up to them if they can turn around comments and do the work they need to do to make it happen, they being Denver First, is that they are shooting for the sketch plat to go in front of you in September. And then all the bundle of things to go before you in October.
Okay.
So those dates would tentatively be the 8th and the 13th.
Correct.
Okay.
And so this is not a promise or a guarantee that either one of these are going to go on that night, because again,
Right.
they have work to do.
No, but I can always pencil it in.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, very good. Is everybody comfortable with all of the above relating to the schedule? Does anybody have any additional comments or questions?
I will probably just send out an email on this to everyone to summarize this in writing, just to make sure that I'm reflecting this conversation appropriately. We may want to, and Kathy, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this. You know, does it make sense for the commission to just vote to hit the pause button?
Well, it probably ought to be a recommendation to council, since council approved the contract, and it would be a suspension pursuant to the terms of the contract. So I can't imagine that there would be much, controversy, but I think that would be probably the right process.
That makes sense.
That does make sense.
Okay.
Kathy, that's why I need adult supervision. So thank you for that.
I need it too.
Kathy, do you have some simple language you would recommend we use in a motion?
Move to recommend City Council to suspend the contract at some point. I don't know.
Probably not tonight.
Not tonight because it's a study.
No. Yeah, but I mean, and we're thinking kind of down the line that's as simple as it would be, a recommendation to suspend pursuant to the contract based on XYZ, because I did look at the contract. It is discretionary in the discretion of the city.
So how about to suspend the contract after completion of the survey question revisions discussed tonight?
That sounds like it reflects the consensus of the group.
We'll work on some language and have it in future packet for you to consider.
Yeah, Chris and I
Yeah,
will.
but don't you, I
Sharpen
mean,
it.
I think where Mike was going, or maybe not, but to try to have that language, because this work isn't gonna take but a couple of more weeks, right? I mean, it ain't, you
Right.
know, right? And council then would want to engage in the discussion to suspend at that point in time, I would think. I mean, you don't want to wait 2 or 3 months going down the road.
No, but so Earl, are you saying it should be done before the September 8th meeting, if that's when we have it?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, to be expeditious, but if that's not possible, and if that's not a concern, that council wouldn't approve suspension of the contract and or the process until late September or early October, I mean, I would think they would.
Can we do a resolution at a virtual meeting?
You can, but this is a study session. There's not really an action item on the agenda here.
Okay,
And I
all right.
do,
Oh,
I do-
yeah.
I do
Okay.
think,
But
I
on
do
that-
think you could get it done real short and simple.
Well, let me throw out a foolish notion. What if we have a very brief meeting on 2 weeks from tonight, whatever that date is, to make this recommendation?
I'm going to go ahead and I try not to insert my editorials too much here. I am going to editorialize on this one issue. However, we probably are going to need at least the 3 weeks to work on getting the survey to reflect tonight's
Sure.
actions. And I don't think we are going to take a lot of extra steps. We're not going to sort of ignore the discussion tonight and keep charging forward and spending gobs of money. I think the
Yeah.
risk of us doing anything beyond what we're talking about is nil. So I think the September 8th is perfectly acceptable.
All right,
Okay.
For us to.
let's plan on that. That's good. Very good. Anything else on that? If not, we'll move into the reports section of our meeting.
Very good.
Okay. Reports number 1, members of P&Z Commission. I assume there's no reports.
No report.
Number two, city staff. Anything new and exciting?
Yes, I do have a report for you. One was that we have a new senior planner. We talked about this a few minutes ago. His name is Paul Workman. He's from Parker. He starts August 24th. So
August 24th.
yes, I think the commission will enjoy working with him. I worked with him many years ago at Commerce City, and he's got a great temperament, and he's got great exposure and experience in a lot of different types of planning. So
Great.
What's his last name, Paul?
Workman, WORKMAN.
Just like it sounds.
Thank you.
No worries. The second update I have for the commission, this is just an update. Nobody, with no action or anything required of this group. This is just a courtesy update about some news about Quincy Farm. I wanted to make the commission aware that the city did receive a letter of interest to take over title and responsibility for the farm from
Oh, really?
Yes, from Natalie Anderson. So
That's Kat Anderson's granddaughter, for
Correct.
anybody who doesn't know.
and she's not really doing this as an individual. It's on behalf of a contingent of her family. So there are lots of issues and questions and things to work through. She's got some internal things that she's still exploring on her side. And then I think after that's done, I think that the city will certainly entertain those conversations, but it is absolutely I have no idea what will happen as a result of this.
This proposal is this, she would then become a surrogate for the city or for Colorado Open Lands?
She would take title.
Oh, no.
She would take title. I talked to Russell about this yesterday. She would take title through a foundation. They would have maintenance responsibilities for the property and not the city. The easement stays in place no matter who owns the property. So theoretically, the benefits to the to Cherry Hills Village are the same without the obligations to maintain the property.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what people are excited about. I'm a little concerned. I mean, you still, being the owner, you have more control than not being the owner and having a foundation run the property, even though the easement is what really controls how the property is used.
It sets
but-
limits. It doesn't set a floor. It sets limits.
limits,
on
right,
property can be used.
But
Yeah.
I would caution you, we are just at the very beginning phase.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you have individual thoughts, please reach out to me offline. I'm not wanting to put you all in a position of putting your position out there right now, because there's so many questions we don't have the answers to.
Sure.
Just to give you an understanding about what this may mean, though, there was an item on the August 18th City Council agenda for next week to amend the contract for services for consulting on the master plan of Quincy Farm. That has been taken off the agenda temporarily, and the Quincy Farm Committee is meeting Tuesday morning. And I don't know what the outcome of this conversation will be, but I know that they are going to consider hitting the pause button on the master plan for Quincy Farm. Well, it could be that all those different moving pieces for Quincy Farm may hit a pause button while this letter of interest is explored. So again, I'm not in a place to prejudge any outcomes or details. I'm just giving you an update so that you're aware of news. It's just news at this point.
Yeah.
Interesting
It's good.
opportunity potentially.
Yes.
I think so too. I mean, I applaud Natalie for doing that.
So those are my updates. How's that? That's pretty good. Those are good updates. I mean, mine aren't always going to be that newsworthy. Right?
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
As the village turns, they like to say. Anything from the city attorney?
No report.
Thank you. Okay, well, anybody else have any comments, questions, concerns, anything we need to talk about? Otherwise, we can adjourn. Cocktail hour is.
All good.
What's that?
All good, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
So I will adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Stay safe.
Thank you. Good night.
Buddy.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.